All right, ladies and gentlemen, day 6 of Biden Watch, and it turns out he has emerged. So we have now officially maybe seen President Joe Biden, but we're still a little bit curious. Did he actually write the letter, right? Did he actually resign, or was that something that just kind of happened and he gave a nod and the email went out and now Kamala's in? Well, we're going to be asking those questions today. Plus, we might go over, if we got a little time, we might go over some of the testimony highlights from the congressional testimony of the director of the United States Secret Service, who has just announced that she is going to be resigning. Probably a good choice, because after the testimony, I think most of us were convinced it was already a vacant seat. But the bigger question is, will Kamala be the new Democrat nominee for president, or could there be somebody waiting on the wings that will actually take that position? We're going to be discussing all of that on more on this episode of Making the Argument. As always, I am your host, Nick Freitas. With me in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone. And I am really waiting for all of you to sing the Tina Was Right song.
We're getting to it. It's in the schedule. It's in the schedule. Oh, my gosh. And then, of course, we have our political prognosticator and resident historian, Christian Hines.
I played Minecraft this weekend.
What a dork. Anyway.
hang on. I got to provide the context now.
No, you really don't.
We have a server of Making the Argument fans that came together and was like, hey, we want to make a Minecraft server. So they invited me on, and I jumped on, and I was able to talk to some of them. Shout out to Connor and Jacob and Sam and Eric and a few others.
Connor, Jacob, Sam, and Eric burn his village to the ground.
And
every time Christian has to screen share, people are commenting on the tab down there on the bar that shows that he's a Minecraft person.
launcher.
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up is because your son has also recently joined.
I know he joined. It's like we've actually had a couple people in circle before to be like, you guys should have a gamer channel. I'm really bad at it. I do look, I'll be honest. I love Rome Total War, and I do like Civ 6. The first person shooter games I'm really bad at, like on Xbox. Like, because I remember old school when it was PC, like I had better control over it. But I remember playing with Luke once, and he just destroyed me. Anyways, moving on. Stop getting us off topic.
We'll call it mining the argument.
Oh my God. This is why we can't have nice things. All right. So we're gonna dive in today. We're gonna be talking about 5 things, right? So, did Biden really withdraw? Right, we're gonna ask that question. We're gonna go over because there's some speculation on that. Will Kamala be the choice? Like, will she be? Is she just the foregone conclusion, or does she have a fight coming up because their convention is not till August? Who are the other potential candidates? Because that's something to talk about. Because if you're a potential candidate, you may be a potential VP pick. We'll take a look at that. And what are our predictions for the race? So we're gonna give you some predictions on who we think the nominee will be and how it will affect the overall race going into November. So we're going to talk about all of that. And then, again, if we have a little bit of time, we got some clips from the testimony with the director of the Secret Service, Ms. Cheadle. Dang.
Well, she did resign, and so she's
resigned.
I don't blame
now,
her. I watched a fair amount of that yesterday, and I could not believe both sides of the aisle completely ripped her to shreds.
Well, I blame her for everything except resigning. That one was quite possibly the best decision she's made as director. And then, of course, later on, not quite yet, we are going to sing the Tina Was Right song, because we did a prediction episode, I think back in March, and I forced everyone to make predictions. And Tina, who is politically savvy, but arguably has the least amount of experience predicting political outcomes, was the only one at this table that predicted that Joe Biden would not be the Democrat nominee. Christian and I, maybe even a little bit arrogantly, was like, no, I get it, but at this point it's too late. They would have had to do it already. And Tina's like, there's no way. There's no way. Just wait. And lo and behold, here we are. Tina was right. We were wrong. And we're going to get into exactly how Tina was right because we're contractually obligated. But there's actually another issue that Tina has been right on that we're going to bring up, and that is when it comes to meat. Good Ranchers is offering a special deal right now. You get your choice of free meat for 4 years plus $25 off your order, right? So you can go to the link in the description in this podcast. Let me say that again very carefully. You go to the link in the description in the podcast. You go there. It lets them know that we sent you, right? And you use promo code Nick, and you're going to get your choice of meat free for 4 years. Here's your choices. You can get boneless chicken breast. By the way, I want to say this. steak is my favorite thing on the planet. Their chicken, because I do like chicken as well, but their chicken is phenomenal. It truly is really good. Angus ground beef, wild-caught sockeye or king salmon, or Applewood smoked bacon, right? So you get to pick one of those for free with your subscription for 4 years, right? So go to the link in the subscription, use my code, promo code Nick. You're going to get an additional $25 off your first box and free express shipping. What is better? What is better than some of the best American raised, free from all the crap that a lot of meat's being injected with, delivered to your home, plus free meat on top of that, right? It doesn't get America. That's what that is.
Free bacon.
America, right? GoodRanchers.com. Use the link in the description. Click on that. Go over there. Promo code Nick. Free meat. $20 off. All right. So, yes, Tina was right and we were wrong. Now, we have a tradition in our house where we sing the mommy is right or the sing the daddy is right song. We're not going to sing the whole thing right here.
Okay.
But it's just essentially, my kids would be like, mommy is right, mommy's right, mommy's right, right. So we would have to do the Tina's right, right, because she was. She saw it. She saw it come in and she's like, there's no way. There's no way. And the rest of us were just convinced because, again, if you're looking at the history of politics on this and the difficulty associated with removing a candidate, especially one that's an incumbent.
But we are in an unprecedented time in our political history where wild things are happening every week right now. It's insane. And for all of us who think, oh man, Joe Biden was going to be so easy to beat, and I would have really loved it if he stayed in.
Yeah.
But and so I'm kind of bummed that I'm right, because they were at a point where Biden, he could not string sentences together. There's a huge problem with his cognitive decline. We weren't saying, oh, he's just an old man. He's too old. We were saying he seriously has problems with his brain function at this point and being able to articulate what he needs to say. And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. And so after his extremely bad debate performance, I think the Democrats saw the writing on the wall. I do think they were hiding this for a really long time, and they knew it was a problem. And there were a few people that were mentioning it here and there that it was a problem, but Kamala kept just coming back and saying, oh no, he's great. He's doing fine. He's virile. He's great. He's vibrant. He's this. She used
Is that the word she used?
She used all those types of words to describe Joe Biden as we were watching him tumble downstairs and fall down and freeze up and use the wrong words and call Zelensky Putin and things like that. And I think that it did get to a point when the funding started to shut off. Like, they would have run him if the funding hadn't shut off.
Well, we're gonna get into that, but the first things first, we're gonna actually read the letter that was sent out on Joe's behalf here, because again, we didn't see him for 6 days, and right now it's not like he walked up. Wait a second. Right now it's not like he walked up and started talking to everybody. We just saw him out and whatever, where it could be. But here's his speech. My fellow Americans, or my fellow dog-faced pony soldier. Over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation down the road of good intentions. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. You know what I love about statements like that? Christian, America's had the strongest economy in the world, I think, since the 1920s.
The 1890s.
1890s, and we took the
largest economy in the world.
All right, so we've had the largest. So good job, Joe. You're taking credit for something that was accomplished in the 1890s and has been consistently ours ever since then. All right. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation. That must be Build Back Better. In lowering prescription drug costs for seniors. I don't think they're aware. And expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. Oh my gosh. Anyways.
In translation, bankrupting the nation.
We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. Passed the first gun safety law in 30 years. Well, clearly it's done wonders. Appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than where we are today. All right. Wow. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, except for half of us, right? Except for half of us that are horrible threats to democracy. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. election. We protected and preserved our democracy. And again, when he says that, he means theirs, not ours. And we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How do you write that? I mean,
okay, so the idea is I don't think Joe wrote that. That was his lawyer that wrote it for him.
His attorney.
No, like they were saying he helped him write it, which means the lawyer wrote it.
Yeah.
And even the signature on it, there's been a lot of, conspiracy theory around it, but it's inconsistent with his regular signature.
He didn't even use White House letterhead.
Well, okay,
Well,
I understand.
it's a campaign. It's not official.
If he would have done a campaign action, which removing yourself from re-election is a campaign action, then you would not use official government letterhead.
Yeah.
It has to have a separation.
All right, but let's get to the main part here, all right? It's been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. Oh my gosh, terrifying. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me re-elected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work. We're going to get into how extraordinary she has been. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people, except for half of you that are threats to democracy, for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I have always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. Signed by Le Blues. All right.
Okay, so Biden conceivably...
That's how his signature looks.
Okay,
Yeah, it is.
So let me backtrack real quick. Jean Pierre, whatever her... Is that
KBJ.
KBJ. She was called out a couple of months ago for tweeting a presidential tweet from her own account because she forgot to switch it over.
Yeah.
She's tweeting for him. So conceivably, Biden's not the one tweeting from his account. And they release this to X.
Yeah.
And that is, they notify us via X that he's not going to run again. He's doing this purely because the writing's on the wall, and
Tina, you're getting ahead.
To benefit the Democrat Party.
We're gonna get into the real reasons that he dropped out, because there's actually some implications here that, since you brought it up,
Just get into
I think
Chris
it's actually,
Rufo's tweet, and your response to it.
There's this tweet by Chris Rufo that I think articulates one take, but I don't think it fully captures the story. And Rufo tweeted this. He said, "The Biden news illustrates an important principle. There is power in law, title, and votes, but it can be overcome by the mobilization of public opinion and elite pressure. They put Biden in the squeeze, and the squeeze won." And, I read this, and I thought that Chris is right to a point, but there's actually something that's, I think a lot of people can overlook when they read this tweet. And so I quoted him, and I elaborated a little bit. And I said, "Public opinion did nothing. The vast majority of the public, and even a majority of Democrats, wanted Biden to drop out for over a year. Yet Biden repeatedly ignored public opinion, even within his own party. It was only after the elites within the DNC apparatus and donor network pulled their support that Biden dropped out. A lesson is to be learned from this whole ordeal about where real power truly lies and what brings about real change." And then I elaborated a little bit further, and I said that the last month or so has been a total vindication for Gaetano Mosca. He wrote, Mosca was an Italian philosopher from the late 19th, early 20th centuries. He was an Italian, obviously, as the name implies. And he wrote this book. That's part of the reason I'm a huge fan of him, right? Because I'm Italian too. He wrote this book in, I believe, 1895 called The Ruling Class. And I've got the PDF, actually, of it pulled up. It's totally free to read. You can look up the PDF on the internet and read the entire thing. It's a great read. I'm in the middle of it right now. How
about you summarize it?
Mosca's point, I'm getting to that. Okay, so Mosca's point in this book is that political power, political change actually comes from the top. And, I didn't have this in our notes, but I encapsulated his overall argument in this tweet here about the problem of the idea that political change comes from the bottom, from just grassroots, from just populist movements. And I said, I'm summarizing his book here. The idea that political or social change comes from a populist revolt against the ruling establishment is a myth. The sobering truth is that most successful political upheavals throughout history have not been driven by the people. And before we started recording, you actually told me that you were thinking about this. And you said that, the only thing I can think of that even got off the ground was the People's Crusade.
Well, the only one that you could point to where there wasn't like some sort of, and even that one, it was Pope Urban actually calling for a crusade, but then you had the People's Crusade, which kind of came up, which didn't, it had, what was it, Peter the Hermit, I think, was like the leader of it. And it basically ended up just like they all got slaughtered.
They all got killed or sold into slavery.
They made it down to Anatolia, but then they got slaughtered. The whole point, though, I think of all of this is that if you look at most movements throughout history, that groundswell of support can be a necessary component, but it's not a sufficient one.
Well, it's usually triggered by somebody at the top doing something to trigger it. Well,
it's not just that. You need some sort of infrastructure available to actually provide legitimacy and leadership to the movement. If it's just a random mob operating by like, oh, we're rising up, the mob gets put down, right? But when you have a political elite, when you have like governors or when you have something like that, it adds legitimacy and infrastructure. And I think Christian's point on this was that this wasn't something to where you could point to this and just say, oh, well, Biden was forced out by a donor elite or a political elite that basically said, you don't got a shot. We're going to dry up the resources. And so you're gone. The bigger point is he was put there by that same elite as well. Like, when has Joe Biden ever had this groundswell of popular support?
Oh, no.
I mean, there's a term in politics where we call a machine politician. And a machine politician, and Tammany Hall was a good example of this. These are people that basically do what they're told. They climb the ladder, they sit on the right committees, they get there, and then if the opportunity comes up, their number gets called and they get to serve. But they're never in charge because they've, produce some sort of unique leadership quality. Like, for instance, Reagan was not a machine politician. Reagan was an incredible communicator, had a groundswell of popular support, became a governor. And Obama was not a machine politician, at least not on the federal side at all. Again, very popular groundswell of support. Trump, not a machine politician at all.
The exact opposite of a machine politician.
But Joe Biden was one of these guys that, it just so happened, right place, right time.
Nobody's excited over Biden. No. And, you can even see in a lot of the statements that came out when people were really calling for him to step aside, there were a lot of other people who did eventually call for him to step aside. But before they did that, they were saying, well, Joe's got to figure out a good exit because, we really owe him. He's served so much time. Yeah. He basically waited in line, and we really owe him some kind of a triumphant off-ramping, something that is honoring and this and that. But nobody cares. Nobody really cared about Biden. Like, all the people pointing out that he got more votes than Obama. He got more votes than Trump did. He got more votes than any other presidential candidate in history. All during COVID. Okay, where we couldn't have in-person voting in some places. It's absurd to think people were really that excited about Joe Biden. And that's one of the reasons why so many conspiracy theories swirl around about the 2020 election. But speaking of conspiracy theories, can I share my conspiracy theory with everybody? Okay, I am getting more and more into these things because more and more of them are proven correct. And there is a point where there's so many coincidences that you start to wonder, can this really be a coincidence? So here's what I think. I think that they wanted to throw Biden over the whole time, but they didn't do it. They waited a little too long. He had a really terrible debate performance, but they knew that they had a plan to make sure Trump would not be the next president. And so they enacted some kind of a contingency plan. I think they were behind the assassination attempt. I think that was definitely a deep state involvement situation. And then you had this CrowdStrike thing where everything goes down And it's a perfect opportunity because everybody's losing information. All these servers are going down, and a lot of them are government servers. So what happens? Oh, it's a perfect opportunity to erase some data that is very sensitive data that the left and the deep state would not want out. And so everybody's losing data, so we lost data too. And so that's just perfect. And then when none of that rest of that stuff worked, and they've got Cheadle in the chair, in the hot seat, answering all these questions, can't answer the questions. Was there an attempt on, were you guys part of this attempt on the life of the president, former president? And then you've got the same people in the FBI who are looking into all of this, and we're supposed to trust this, even though they're the same people that kicked in Mar-a-Lago, right? I'm sorry, but too many things are lining up, and I'm just looking at this going, okay, and then it didn't work to get rid of the competition. It didn't work to get rid of Trump. They saw this groundswell of support after Hulk Hogan ripped his shirt off.
Stop getting that excited about it, baby.
You know what? Everybody became 8 years old again. And let me just say, when none of that worked, they finally had to pull the plug on poor Joe. And he was circling down the drain already. They pulled the plug on him. Kamala is right there, ready to jump in, just like that Veep clip. Yeah. I'm just looking at it going, man, this lines up way too good.
You know why they pulled the plug on him, though? It's really simple. It's very simple. They pulled the plug on him because he's going to lose, or he was going to lose. If the polling situation had been reversed, Biden has been trailing Trump since, I believe, September of last year. So you're talking, what, 9 months now? Almost a year? If Biden had been consistently leading Trump by 4 or 5 points, they wouldn't have pulled the plug on him. They would have continued to gaslight the American people into thinking this guy is capable of executing the office of the job of the office of the presidency, even if he wasn't, because they would have concluded he can win. Because at the end of the day, the left is a memeplex geared towards the acquisition and consolidation of power. Nothing else matters other than the revolution. And the revolution is the mechanism through which you obtain political power. And so therefore, you ditch this guy because he's the first guy in literally 20 years that is trailing his Republican counterpart in the national popular vote and certainly in the swing states. If that was not the case, if Joe Biden had been leading Donald Trump consistently up until July 21st of this year, he would not be forced out. The reason that the DNC elites, the reason that the donor network used the upswell of support, to go back to the Mosca analogy, because when elites want change, but there's no catalyst, there's no mechanism to bring about change, all that they're doing is engaging in navel gazing, right? All that they're doing is sitting on their couch, philosophizing to themselves. Elites can only bring about change, or a counter elite can only bring about change or bring about concessions or regime change of any sort when there's circumstances, when there's catalysts that enable them to do so. So a good example in a negative sense historically is World War I provided the mechanism through which the vanguard of the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, were able to topple the Tsar in Russia. There was a catalyst there, namely being Russia was losing a war to Germany and Austria-Hungary. A positive example of this, where I think an elite brought about very good change, is the founding fathers in our own country. Mm-hmm. And I need to get this across because when people hear the phrase elites, rightfully so nowadays, they associate this with negative things, right? Because we're currently ruled over by a terrible elite. But what Mosk is getting to and what I'm getting to when I say elite is more servant leadership in a positive sense. In the U.S., there were legitimate frustrations with the way that things were being governed under the British Crown. And we did a podcast on this recently, actually. And there was an upswell of grassroots support, but it didn't stop there, right? The founding fathers came in and they took these legitimate grievances and were able to turn them into the most successful positive revolution ever in world history. And so it's when you have a combination of legitimate grievances, of catalysts with elite pressure, that you actually get the sort of change that takes place. But it's not one or the other.
I think the point Tina is also making as well, though, is that when elites see that the conditions are ripe, but they don't have a catalyst yet, they're not beyond creating their own catalyst. They will make a catalyst.
They'll make their own catalyst, yeah. They're
not beyond creating their own catalyst. And that's the part where, again, this has always been dismissed as phony conspiracy theory. I'd actually like to do an episode kind of looking into, especially as when we're able to get more information, even though I think a lot of it's being restricted, and some of it, the claim is going to be, well, we're engaging in investigations and it's, privileged information or classified information. I will say this, when I looked at a combination of some of the testimony from the hearings, when we analyzed some of the stuff with the actual site where the assassination attempt took place, we looked at everything. Again, my rule is always, I'm an Occam's razors guy, or Occam's razor guy. The simplest solution is usually, the most accurate or the most direct solution. And then the other one is I try to chalk up to incompetence. I don't chalk up to malice that which can be better assigned to incompetence. I will say, though, when you have enough conditions in place and there's a certain point where the incompetence level is so extreme and so absurd as to basically force you to suspend reality. Mm-hmm. That's the part where I start saying, okay, and we've discussed this before. What makes a conspiracy theory just some whack job claim versus plausible versus probable? And I think there's an interesting conversation to take place there. And it doesn't mean that, every single person in the government was, clearly that's not the case. But is it plausible that a small group of people that saw conditions that were really problematic and saying, okay, this might be the last chance to do something about it, took action? Yeah, I think that's plausible. I don't know how probable it is, but I think it's plausible. And then when it comes to the idea of, it failed, holy crap, he's never had more support in the country. We can't go with the guy, and this goes to Christian's point. And I remember, I think I tweeted this out like the night of I said, Biden is not being asked to resign because of cognitive decline. He's being asked to resign because of polling decline.
Yes.
If he was 5 points ahead in the polls, they wouldn't care if he could string a sentence together because they didn't care for the past 12 months when he couldn't string a sentence together. And so anyway, but for right now, for all intents and purposes, it looks like Biden's going to be out. I actually look forward to hearing what he has to say about it because everything that we've heard right now has been communicated through X. It's been communicated through letters. I really want to see what he says.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be telling. I think the other thing that I would really like, here's what I like to say. If for some reason Democrats win, I think Biden had to be promised something because regardless of where he is in the cognitive decline, Jill Biden isn't in cognitive decline. And she knows that her family faces some real uphill battles and potential challenges because of a lot of things Hunter did, because of a lot of things that Joe Biden did that has become, there's no way Biden gave this up without being guaranteed some
pardons
things.
are on their way because I think that's one of the reasons why Biden was so insistent on staying in is because he's waiting for Hunter's trials to be over so he can pardon him. So that's probably part of the bargaining chip is that Kamala, if she wins, will pardon Hunter, but also conceivably Biden himself as well.
I think their family got promised to be taken care of financially, even though they're already in pretty good shape.
And that's assuming that he was behind everything, but we still don't know that. As of the recording of this, we were going to try to go live, you guys, but we had some technical difficulties, and so we're not live. So we're recording it and immediately publishing it. And here's the deal is right now we're still waiting for Biden to address the nation. The closest thing that we saw to Biden actually showing some sort of proof of life, right, was, and this has been how many days now?
I think it was 6 before
6 or 7 days. Well, he came forward in an audio recording, which could have very easily been AI, and a lot of people think it was AI. He didn't. We still have not actually seen Joe Biden talking for himself. It's really easy to clone someone's voice via AI, and that call in was super suspicious sounding.
Well, let's. I want to move to the second part here, and that's talking about Kamala as the presumptive nominee at this point. Now, we have some clips here because I'd like to do a little Kamala Harris in her own words, as we all know that she's probably one of the most gifted orators.
She's quite amazing
in all of American political history. So we can get the can we get the first one that we have? For Kamala?
Here we go.
Ahead. All right.
Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, "I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Who hasn't?
You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
what in the world did she just say? Here's the crazy part, you guys, is that Joe Biden has cognitive decline, and we just know that this is like beginning, this is dementia for him. For her, she's just a moonbat. That's her only excuse, is that she's a box of rocks.
That was actually a relatively tame one compared to some of the other ones.
She's at the top of her game. Yeah, well, I don't understand that. Do you think you're the first to fall out of the coconut tree? Like, maybe this is a reference I don't understand. But then
afterwards, it was, what kind of word salad was that?
She will find ways to, and look, everybody in politics tries to find profound ways to say something or to illustrate a point. But typically, when you say something profound, it's because you've provided some sort of example or some sort of new perspective on the term. She doesn't. She will take something very simple, like, we all exist. We're all a product of our own experiences in past. And she will say, you exist in the context of everything that is and has come before. And it's like, She reminds me of like kind of the goofy guru trying to say,
yes,
like almost like Yoda-isms, like,
What she is ultimately she's a midwit that thinks that she has 180 IQ. And I mean, that's really harsh to put it that way, but she overly articulates things to the point that she under-articulates them. She's trying too hard to get across simple phrases. And what's so interesting about her almost fake attempt to come across as some sort of intellectual genius is that, like, the real reason that people listen to, some of the greatest thinkers and philosophers of all time is not necessarily because they come up with brand new stuff. The reason that they listen to them is because they're able to articulate things which we already know to be true in a way which we ourselves have not necessarily thought of before.
Yeah.
Like, most people throughout history, a good example of this is most people throughout history understood how politics worked, but they weren't able to articulate it in certain ways until Machiavelli wrote The Prince and was able to demonstrate, no, this is how power flows, and it's neither good or bad, and Machiavelli was not necessarily a good person, right? But he was able to articulate things which people already understood about politics in a way that they themselves had not yet put into words. A lot of like early Greek philosophy is built around this as well. Like Herodotus invents the concept of history. That doesn't mean that people didn't understand what past and present were.
Yeah.
Right?
But she tries to do that, and it always ends up just
Don't we
coming
have
off.
a few more clips
we do.
illustrate the point?
And, well, now that we're talking about history, perhaps we should give it Kamala's take on the passage of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this might be the worst one of all. Here we go.
Governor and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
What?
Wow. Was that like, did she say there's great significance in the passage of time 5 times?
5 times.
It was like 4 or 5 times.
She defined the concept using the concept itself,
yes.
which is a
huge no-no.
Right
well, it's there's great significance in the passage of time, and what that means is that there's great significance in the passage of what?
Time, of course.
Oh, dang. Wow. Nailed it. Like, hard to argue with that reasoning, right? Like, but again, it's like she so desperately wants to be. I would have had more sympathy for at this point. And listen,
she speaks in spirals. It's like she's circling the drain.
There's a point where she catches on. Like, if you watch it, there's a point where she catches on where it's like, oh crap, I don't know how to land this plane, and so she just nosedives it into the tarmac.
She's stuck in a death loop. It's like when your computer won't let you out of the loop it's doing, and you're like, why can't I get out of this loop?
Yeah, she got the latest CrowdStrike software update. But
I think that happens in her mind.
No, if I may, what's really interesting about the significance of the passage of time is that, and Nick, I think you actually would appreciate this. When you read history, especially when you read older philosophy, you end up concluding pretty quickly that ideas are actually eternal and they come back. And many things that we have foolishly attempted today, thinking that we're geniuses, people have attempted in the past. Likewise, many things that we have foolishly discarded today, thinking that it's outdated, superstitious mumbo jumbo, people have attempted in the past and to great success have implemented them. Well, so like a good example is we're talking right now in today's podcast about Biden stepping aside. Well, in many respects, Biden being forced out by his own party, even after he won the primaries. And Tina, to your point about how unprecedented this is, to give you an idea of how unprecedented this is, LBJ dropped out in March of 1968 when the primaries were beginning for the Democratic Party. Joe Biden has dropped out after he's already won the primaries. That has never happened before, ever. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're talking about Biden being forced out by his own party. And here I was earlier discussing the writings of an Italian philosopher from 100 years ago, over 100 years ago in the 1890s, and how he articulated that political change comes from elites within an institution or within a society or within a country that bring about change using catalysts and using mechanisms in order to execute what they wish to desire. The best example of that we've just lived through in the past few days is the DNC elites forcing their own presidential nominee out after gaslighting the American people for almost a year now that he was totally fine, and realizing that shtick wasn't going to work any longer.
Cheap fakes.
And so therefore...
They call them cheap fakes. When we were looking at how Biden would speak and like all of his flubs, oh, well, these are cheap fakes put out by the right, and they couldn't hide it anymore.
So plan A didn't work, and the polling showed that it wasn't going to work. So plan B is we're going to execute a last-second coup d'etat on our own nominee to replace him with at least a Hail Mary that might have a better chance of pulling it off.
This is plan C. Plan B was to execute our nominee.
Okay, well, the jury's out on that. But the overarching point that I'm trying to get across is that people have talked about what we're currently living through over a century ago. So you want to talk about real significance of the passage of time? Go open up a book that's over 100 years old and actually start reading that. That's a great piece of advice that I would give people.
I think the important part now, Christian, is that Kamala is now unburdened by what has been.
Okay, we got to play this.
Okay.
We've got to play this one.
Well, yeah, because it's so much better when she says it.
Imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Well,
I mean,
she is now trying to see if she can be what can be unburdened by what has been. That's
you know what's crazy about this is that she said it so many times on the campaign trail that somebody, and you know how this works, right? Somebody on her team must have come up to her and said, man, that's really profound. You need to just integrate that into your stump speech and make that your phrase.
Yeah.
Who on earth gave her that advice?
Well, here's what I don't understand. Didn't she tell us like a couple speeches ago that we all live within the context of what has been, but now she wants to be unburdened by it for the what?
Well, the left definitely wants to be unburdened by what has been because they want to tear down all tradition, all history.
Unless it's Marx.
I think the reason this means so much to her that she puts it in every speech she can, except of course the one where Biden now is unburdening her by whatever. Anyway, the reason this means so much to her is because she is a vice president of the United States who is unburdened by the fact that she was previously a mistress to Willie Brown and previously a high-dollar call girl to Montel Williams. I mean, she was a side piece, you guys. She was pretty much a prostitute. And she is unburdened by what has been
part out loud.
And she is now hopeful of what is to come. And this method of thinking has worked so well for her. It has been her mantra for her life. And as far as I'm concerned, it's working for her.
So the next one I want to go to is, again, Kamala first came out when she was running for president. She was one of the crowd favorites, right? It kind of hinted that, obviously there was a kind of a difficult situation for Obama because Joe Biden as vice president was running the whole deal. But it was obvious that he had tried to help set her up for future political success at the federal level. And she had actually done okay in some of the debates. There was that whole scene between her and Joe Biden where she essentially called Joe Biden a racist initially. And I was the little girl on the bus and the whole deal. And the press kind of ate that up and we're pushing it. where I think where her presidential campaign ended was not because of anything a Republican did. It was because Tulsi Gabbard brought out something that Kamala Harris had done. So let's click on the clip from the debate with where Tulsi Gabbard just kind of breaks her down on stage.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Now, what was again interesting about that is regardless of how you feel about individual positions with marijuana or whatnot, it had to be like just horribly offensive to have someone who kind of campaigned when she was attorney general as I'm a tough prosecutor, right? Put people in jail for marijuana, regardless of how you feel about that. She put people in jail for marijuana and then sat there and bragged on air about smoking marijuana.
And listening to Tupac.
And which the timeline didn't match up there. But the point is that, again, it's this complete disingenuous nature of who Kamala Harris is and what she actually believes. And that's one of the things that has really bothered Americans about Kamala Harris. When she first came onto the scene, I think everybody was like, black female attorney general from the most populous state in the country, clearly friends with the Obamas. She's going to be a force to reckon with.
Yeah.
And then in the confirmation hearing for Kavanaugh, she was one of the main people that was just driving that point home and just became a darling of like the Me Too movement and everything else. And it didn't matter that there was nothing even approaching sufficient evidence to actually accuse Brett Kavanaugh of this. She used it as an opportunity to elevate herself and put herself in the position of I'm defending a victim from, Trump's, sex offender Supreme Court nominee. So she was kind of riding high on all of this. And a lot of people were getting to know who she was. And that was the lens from which they viewed her, is that she had, again, especially if you're on the left, because primaries are all about appealing to your base, good credentials, right? Strong performance within the Senate, within the confirmation hearings, some opening strong performances against Joe Biden, compelling backstory, some of it, maybe not all of it. And then Tulsi Gabbard just like pretty much tears away this facade that had been created. And all of a sudden she's having to answer real questions. And the moment she wasn't dealing with a darling, fawning press, she found herself in real trouble on the debate stage.
She never recovered from that.
Never recovered. And here's a couple things. And then obviously, Joe Biden comes out and says, I'm going to nominate a black woman for vice president.
Yeah, that is the biggest problem out of everything that's happened, if you think about it, because this is also why the Democrats are now going to be stuck with Kamala Harris. And the reason why is because at the end of the day, the Democratic Party is not a party that cares about meritocracy. The Democratic Party cares about identity. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge difference there, which is why we're increasingly moving towards a kleptocratic regime rather than a meritocratic one. Talking about ruling classes again, right? The DNC represents the ruling class that wants to loot the republic. But here's the problem. Sometimes when you put forward certain people that are deeply unpopular and are literally incapable of appealing to the type of swing voters that can, determine who the president is, you are stuck with a certain candidate, not because you think that they're the best candidate to actually win, but because you cannot pay the political price for not nominating them because they've checked off all your identity boxes. This is the conundrum that the Democratic Party is now currently in. You live by the DEI, you die by the DEI. Because when Biden said...
Trump almost died because of the DEI.
Well, that's also true. Unfortunately, the tragedy in all this is that we will also die by the DEI, unfortunately. But for Democrats, when somebody like Biden says, I'm going to nominate as my vice presidential candidate a black woman, not because I think that this person's going to be the most capable vice president possible, but literally because of the identity characteristics of this candidate. Well, when you've elevated that, what you end up having is when Biden drops out, well, guess what? you can't remove Kamala Harris within the Democratic Party because how dare you remove the potential first black female presidential,
that would
nominee.
be the only reason she loses too. That is
going to be the reason she'll probably lose.
I think the deeper issue with Joe Biden making that claim is that the moment you said, I don't care what the race is, I don't care what the sex is. The moment you said, I'm going to pick this, no matter how good, let's imagine for a moment that it wasn't Kamala Harris. Let's imagine for a moment that it was a different candidate who had excellent credentials, incredibly articulate, very effective, had proven themselves time and time again as being a good, executive or administrator or whatever it was. So let's assume that Joe Biden picked someone that we all would have agreed, oh man, yeah, that outstanding pick. Because he prefaced it with, I'm going to pick a black female. Mm-hmm. There would have been people assuming
it diminishes her credentials.
It diminishes her credentials because of what he said. If he thought she was the best person for the job, just pick her. I'll never forget my dad telling me this story when he was in LAPD, and the LAPD came down and were explaining their version of DEI that they had. This was back in I think it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they get down, and it's this, I guess it was, funny enough, I think it was a white captain that was explaining how wonderful this program was and how you can take advantage of it. And a black sergeant raises his hand, and he goes, I don't like our program. And he goes, I'll tell you why. He goes, when I took the sergeant's exam, I scored in the top, I think it was like 3% of everybody that scored, right? But it didn't matter because I didn't have to. And so now I don't get to be the sergeant. I get to be the black sergeant because of you. I made it on my own. I worked, I studied, I did the work I did everything I was supposed to do, and I accomplished this. I earned it, but because I didn't have to, you give people the right to assume that maybe I didn't.
It's the bigotry of low expectations.
It is absolutely horrible. And that's the part that frustrates me so much about that is that, again, you could have picked somebody that would have been an excellent pick, but instead you decided that was going to be the determination. That was going to be the primary factor in narrowing down from millions of people that you could have picked. And it's insulting.
And remember how we just talked about that, you live by the DEI, you die by the DEI? Democrats are now in a terrible position if you think about it, because they cannot get rid of Kamala as their nominee. I know that we wanted to talk about this on this show. Like, are they going to run with her? My take, and I don't know what your guys' take is, but my take is they have to run with her because they've already declared, no, we are upholding people to a level of sacredness, not based on their skill set, but based on their immutable characteristics.
Yeah.
At that point, you cannot be the Democrat in the room to say, I don't think Kamala can win Michigan and Pennsylvania because she cannot connect with the voters there. Well, she can't connect with voters anywhere, I think. I don't think she's electable. Nobody can make that argument. Nobody can make the argument that, I don't think that Kamala is electable for the same reasons that I don't think Joe Biden was electable. She presided over this administration that's the most unpopular administration in American history. She was put in charge of the border crisis by Joe Biden. And what did she do? She gave us the largest influx of illegal immigrants into America in our 248-year history. I think that's going to be a deal breaker for swing voters in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. I don't think she can win. You can't say that as a Democrat now because it's going to be you're attacking the potential first black female Indian president. You just can't do it. And so they're stuck with her.
Well, let's
at least in my opinion.
Let's look into that, right? So we have, because there's two sides of this. And I want to kick off this. We're going to kick off this third segment talking about other potential candidates, and I want to kick it off actually with the conversation of someone that could have been potentially a contender, but now they're looking at a potential presidential candidate. That's the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. And it was interesting when Josh Shapiro got mentioned, I think on CNN as a potential vice presidential candidate. The Democrat strategist or commentator said, well, he's a first-term governor and he's Jewish. That could be risky. So understand something. It's not just that they will elevate, immutable characteristics as the deciding factor or critical factor with respect to who they choose. They're also using immutable characteristics in order to decide who is not acceptable. And it's like, oh, new Democratic Party, same as the old. And that's pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic. But here's the crazy part. Are they wrong given the current condition of the Democratic Party and what they've done and what they've encouraged and this whole oppressor-oppressed dynamic that they put forward? The bottom line is what that Democrat strategist said out loud was usually the quiet part, but it's not anymore. They've actually gotten to a point where they are more than willing to come out and say, you're acceptable or preferable based off of your race, and you're not acceptable or preferable based off of your race.
Mm-hmm. Nick, that's why the current swing states are the current swing states. Mm-hmm. If you remember, Michigan was not a swing state in the Obama era. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, these were not swing states until 2016. Obama won them handily, and the reason why is because he was strong with white working class voters. Obviously, Michigan and Wisconsin being very white states that are part of the Rust Belt, that have a lot of former blue collar voters. Many of them come from industries that have now left town, right? Many of them used to be like union members, and so they used to be loyal Democratic base voters. The Democratic Party views whiteness as a problem. The Democratic Party views toxic masculinity as a problem. And
now they view Jewishness as a problem.
And we've talked about this before, that they will lift up a group when they think it suits them to obtain power. So it used to be you appeal to the working class and you win, right? Obviously, post-World War II, you appeal to Jewish voters and you win, right? Well, at some point, the groups that you uplift outlive their usefulness, and then you get discarded. And they discarded white working class voters starting in the 90s and the 2000s. And by now they're at war with those people. And they're now in the process of discarding Jewish Americans, or just Jews in general. They're discarding them right now. They will eventually they're discarding the old school feminists. We've talked about this. Look at how they treat J.K. Rowling. Look at they're discarding the former New Atheist people. Look at how they treat Bill Maher. Look at how they treated James Lindsay. These were all people that used to be on the left, and they're discarding every single one of them one by one. Why? Because they don't serve their usefulness anymore. But to the broader point, this is why the swing states are what they currently are, because Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania used to be blue states. We did a whole podcast where we talked about how we think states are going to go, and I showed the electoral trends of these states going back to the 80s. These were not competitive states until Trump came along. And what he did was he tapped into the resentment of the average person that lives in those states. And he basically told them, the Democratic Party hates you. They hate you. They used to pander to you. They used to appeal to you. You have outlived your usefulness to them, and they hate you. They found somebody else to appeal to. I don't hate you. I will listen to you, and I will do what you want to be done in Washington, D.C. It was as simple as that. And he turned these states from blue states into swing states. In some of these states, he turned from swing states like Ohio into red states.
Well, let's get into that when we get into the prediction segment. Like right now, I want to focus on who we think these candidates are going to be. So to give you an idea, some of the things that were put forward as possible running mates, and I understand anybody that they're talking about as a possible running mate is potentially someone that could have been a contender for the nomination itself. You know, you got Governor Roy Cooper, white guy. Governor Josh Shapiro, white guy. Senator Mark Kelly, white guy. Governor Andy Beshear, white guy. Governor J.B. Pritzker, white guy. And then Governor Gretchen Whitmer, white woman. Right? So, and then the other person that you could potentially look at as that would have been a candidate would have been who? Gavin Newsom, white guy. So here's my question, right? For anybody that's considering other candidates out there, the Democrat bench, show me one of them that right now at this stage in the race is going to get up there and say, yes, I will be the one to take the nomination from a black woman who currently happens to be the sitting vice president of the United States. I don't think any of them do it for two reasons. I think one, they have worked themselves into an ideological ditch that they can't get out of. Two, if you look at the current status of things, right, it does not look good for Democrats. It just doesn't. It looks horrible for them right now, regardless of who they pick. And pretty much everyone I read off there, with maybe a couple of exceptions, has plenty of runway. Plenty of runway.
Yeah.
And none of them want to be the guy to go up against Trump amidst everything that has just happened right now. They don't want to be that guy. They don't want to be the guy that has to completely start their presidential campaign in August of 2024.
Yeah.
So no, I'll tell you what each one of the white Democrats is going to do. They're going to be like, I completely and wholeheartedly support Kamala Harris going into the meat grinder that is going to be the 2024 election or presidential election cycle.
Yeah, it'll get her out of the way for next time.
And when she loses,
then I'll run in 2028.
then we can run again because now we don't have that same dynamic.
And Trump will be term limited too.
And
Contrary to the fears of the democracy people.
The only person that could have potentially really challenged Michelle gave it away.
Freudian slip.
Kamala is Michelle Obama. I think she's the only one that legitimately could have stood up there. And if she would have done it, enough Democrats would have said, okay, cool, this is perfect, right? We can tell you to step aside. But that was it. And from everything that's being said, Michelle Obama has absolutely zero intention of doing that. Now, who knows? A lot can change between now and
So you think Harris will be the nominee?
I think I don't think it
be a
anyone else.
coronation.
I think Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee.
She's already locked up all of Biden's most of Biden's delegates.
If Gavin
enough
Newsom,
of them to win, so no one's going to go announce against her.
I think Gavin Newsom wants to be president more than anything in the world, but I also think he understands that timing is important. Now. He also runs a risk, right? Because, you can't have a lot of time in between when you're governor and when you run for president and things like that. But I think he understands that if he tries to do it right now, it's going to cause a lot of problems internally within the Democratic Party. And the last thing the Democrats can afford right now is a contentious convention. Right. They can't afford something where they piss off a bunch of the base, the people. They can't have like a Bernie Sanders style revolt on their hands going into this one. I think the other reason, too, why they are so determined to try to just get the best thing they possibly can and go after it is because I do believe that the administrative state is terrified of a Trump-Vance presidency. And the biggest thing, and this we discussed this before, the biggest thing that the left is probably focusing on at this point is put forward a candidate. Maybe we figure out a way to win. If we don't, we invest everything in keeping the bureaucracy in place.
Fortify the Leviathan as much as possible.
Fortify the Leviathan and write out 4 years of Trump. Hey, if he can't get both houses of Congress, he's going to be severely restricted on what he can actually accomplish other than vetoing stuff.
Well, I think with the Democrats, we're talking about sort of abstract reasons why, intellectual reasons why they will or will not choose this candidate over that. There's also a lot of logistical reasons. The money. Kamala is already on the ticket with Biden. And since her name is already on the campaign committee, there is a lot less paperwork. It's a lot easier for that war chest just to transfer over to Kamala. If it's not Kamala, how do you say her freaking name? I say it different every time I say it. Anyway, if it's not Kamala, you may have a lot more paperwork, a lot more legal challenges, and there's a lot of different ways that you can get in trouble for trying to redirect funds. And so this maybe keeps them from having to spend that massive war chest on legal challenges. The other thing too is she's already on the Democrat ticket. And so in a lot of these states, you can't swap out your nominee for another nominee, but she is already on that ticket. So maybe they're going to be able to find some loophole or whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of people that are saying, unless they invoke the 25th, it's going to be really hard in a couple of these states. And there's going to be a lot of legal challenges because some of these states require that you either die or the 25th is invoked, or else you can't switch out your candidate. So like if your party, let's say Trump had died and it's beyond the time to be able to swap out a candidate, since we lost our candidate due to a death, you could then put somebody else in. Likewise, on the other side, death also, but the 25th Amendment, removing a president, is also one of the only ways to swap somebody out in some of these states. And so I think they're looking for, hey, she's already on the ticket. Her name's already on there. Maybe we can just switch the order or figure something out, and she's already there. So I think that they do have legal minds working towards some of these things. And so the logistical problems with somebody else, I think, are kind of insurmountable.
I think they have worse logistical problems than ballot access. I think they have a voting logistical problem. They have a polling problem right now. Have you guys seen some of because there have not been a lot of polls, right? between Trump and Harris. Most of them have been between Trump and Biden, obviously, until now. But the polling that has come out, right, in recent days and weeks is not good for Harris. I'm staring at a PPP poll, also funded by Progress for Action. So this is a Democratic pollster. PPP is public policy polling. Yeah. It's a left-wing pollster, although I will say in their defense, they actually do put out decent polls. Their polling right now has Trump up by 6 in Pennsylvania, 8 in Arizona, 2 in Michigan, and 1 in Wisconsin. Plus 6 in Pennsylvania, 51-45. He's not even, it's not even like, 48, 46 or something. He's over 50% in Pennsylvania, according to a Democratic pollster.
Yeah.
Remember how the Electoral College is laid out. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he's won the whole thing. It doesn't even matter what happens to Arizona, or, to Wisconsin or Michigan. I mean, he just wins Georgia, which he's solidly ahead in, and Pennsylvania. He can lose every other swing state and still win the White House.
I think the other thing, too, that's important to remember about this is, I mean, when you look at the credentials. Now, let me back up a little bit. I think we're in a good position to win. I also believe Republicans are infinitely capable of screwing this up.
Yep.
If Republicans want to focus on, oh, this was a relationship with Willie Brown, or this was a relationship with this, or this is what she did that. If they really want to focus on the morality component of her past, let's be honest, Donald Trump was not our best pick to have the morality battle.
Right.
Right? That's just reality. Okay? And it's not the substantive issue facing this election. The number one thing, and I think it might have been Abigail Schreier, I can't remember, somebody said this. She goes, Republicans can lose this if they screw this up and they come off looking like a bunch of douchey misogynists. She didn't use that terminology, but that's essentially what she was saying. She goes, the thing that we should be saying from now until election day is, weren't you the border czar? like one of the biggest issues in this race. And by the way, it's a big issue regardless of where you live. It's not just Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, whatever Gulf
It's
states.
an issue in Philadelphia.
It is an issue everywhere. Her job, like the primary task she was given as vice president to go down and fix, was the border. And we've actually got to, I want to bring up this clip real quick. She was interviewed about this because they're like, you're the border czar. There's clearly a big problem at the border right now. What are you doing? And this was part of an interview that she had. Go ahead and put that up. Because there was obviously a lot of questions, because even if, again, the Biden administration kind of came in with this whole idea of Trump's big and mean, and we're gonna cancel all this funding for the wall because we don't need that, and we're a hospitable country, and really what this is that they don't understand the difference between hospitality and accommodation, right? Just changing everything about yourself for somebody else. But it finally got so bad the press even had to ask her what would have been considered a moderately difficult question to a Republican, but for a Democrat, they're like, I can't, how dare you would ask me a question about whether or not I've actually aspired to do my job. So
I got the clip.
Let's go ahead and click on it.
We're going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
What the
heck? Oh, yeah.
She was using the royal we.
Yeah, we have been to the border. The people that work for me, my staffers have been to the border. My peons have been to the border. I've sent people to go to the border and get me information and then come back and brief it to me within the safety and air conditioning of my office.
Right, which is why Abbott tried to send the border to these people, because they wanted to pretend none of this was happening until suddenly all these people were showing up in their sanctuary cities.
The border showed up to the vice presidential residence in D.C. and then all of a sudden it was, this is kind of a problem, huh? Well, and that was the point. This was. She obviously didn't have a record as Attorney General of California that she could run on. California's kind of a mess. And when she tried to switch over into, I'm not a rule of law prosecutor. I'm a, happy-go-lucky criminal justice reform. The police are bad. And she got slammed on it. So she, all of a sudden, those credentials that supposedly she had from California, she didn't. She didn't have a great deal of credentials within the Senate. except for trashing Brett Kavanaugh, right? And then calling Joe Biden a racist on the debate stage. So she didn't have anything she could do there, but now she's vice president. And now she's been given a task, an important one, a task that presumably she would have had resources in order to deal with. Mm-hmm. And by the way, for all the Democrats that are screaming that, well, we tried to get the resources, Republican voted no because you wanted the issue. You wanted the issue more than you wanted the solution. I just want to point something out. Donald Trump was able to do all the things that he did to cut down border crossings to the lowest that they had been like in recorded history, right? With all of the power and authority that Joe Biden had. Why did you need more? You did it. You knowingly went in there and you cut out Trump era policies such as we're going to confirm your status while you stay on that side of the border. We're not going to catch you, release you, and then be like, oh, wait,
where'd you go?
You weren't a refugee. Oh, no. Like, you did that. You did that. You took away any sort of COVID protocols, right? At the same time that you were saying, my gosh, kids need to have masks in schools or else they'll die. You were letting people cross the border without masks. Mm-hmm. You weren't sending them back. Right. And then, of course, you stopped border construction and then you try to come up with we'll call it a border barrier. No. You cut it. And then you even had to admit that, yeah, this is really hard it's really hard to man this station when we don't actually have points that we can focus on. You did all of these things. And then, right, you sent Kamala to deal with it. You were going to give us your solution for the border. And what did Kamala Harris do? What did she do with the single greatest opportunity that she was given as a member of the executive branch to be able to deal with an issue that was having disastrous effects on Republicans, Democrats, border states, non-border states, sanctuary cities? The answer is she made it worse.
Yeah.
And now she's saying, look at what I did as vice president. Imagine what I could do with all of that executive power.
Imagine what can be
unburdened from what has been.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to ignore all the facts about her past, obviously, and don't mimic me. Don't go on a rant about what a horse she is. What you should probably do is focus a lot more on the fact that there is a massive caravan starting off right now.
Yeah.
Headed here because they're terrified that Harris's, policies won't be forever, and so they better get here right away.
Oh, does anybody doubt for a second? That if on, that first Tuesday in November, the polls come in and, oh my gosh, Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States. Does anybody have any doubt about what happens at the border next and what continues to happen for at least 4 more years? Anybody?
Right.
Can anybody honestly tell me, no, Nick, it'll be different this time? It could be worse. I agree. It could be worse, but there's no way it's getting better.
Right. But they see the writing on the wall. They see that the Democrats are not polling well, and they're able to come in no problem under the Democrats. They're scared to death that that's going to end, that the open door policy is going to end, that they're not going to be able to just come on over here as easily. And so they're all gathering and they're trying to get across the border before November. I feel like we could just show all of this. It literally is an invasion. And I feel like showing her failure in that light and showing what's looming and more of the same will happen is probably most of what we need to be doing as a strategy.
That is definitely how you end up beating her, is you focus on her record and you focus on the flip-flopping, you focus on her inability to connect with people, because I mean she just comes across as fake and inauthentic in every single respect, right? She's constantly trying to reinvent herself, right? She started off as this tough on crime prosecutor, and then she turns into this progressive liberal activist that, is putting up Facebook or Twitter links, for bailing out Antifa members in the summer of love of 2020, right? And BLM rioters. I mean, people leave that out of the equation, right? She's constantly reinvented herself in order to suit a political end. Like you mentioned that tying it in with what Tulsi was talking about in that debate, she runs as this, hard on crime prosecutor, but then she goes on radio shows and she jokes about doing marijuana, and then she lies about how she's listening to like Biggie and Tupac when that was
trying
way
to-
after she was in college.
She was just trying to identify with a voter demographic that she was trying to court.
She's trying too hard, and at the end of the day, voters can tell when you're just straight up pandering to them, right? Like, there's a difference between pandering to somebody and actually being able to connect with them, genuinely being able to connect with them. A good example of this is Obama was, believe it or not, and there's plenty of stuff that us at the table do not like about Obama, vast majority of stuff. But at the end of the day, Obama was able to connect with swing voters because of his ability to articulate how they were feeling about things.
Yeah.
A good example of this is that Obama in some ways came from somewhat humble beginnings. He wasn't, born with a silver spoon. And so even though he was a black man born in Hawaii, he was able to connect with white working class voters in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio because they had a shared experience to some degree. Likewise, Trump is a multi-billionaire businessman, and yet he's definitely able to connect with those same type of voters because of rhetoric, because of connecting on the issues. He doesn't have the same life experiences, but he certainly has the same worldview in the sense of how he's able to articulate what the problem is. He's able to talk to a voter in Michigan and be like, I know nobody's talking to you. Mm-hmm. Nobody's giving you the time of day. And half of our people in office absolutely hate you. I don't hate you. And I'm going to listen to you. And I'm going to do what you think needs to be done. He's able to connect with them. Kamala Harris does not have either of those two men's ability to connect with swing voters. She just physically doesn't.
Well, and I think they know that, and that is why you're watching the Twitterverse. That's why you're watching everybody else trying to manufacture enthusiasm about Kamala Harris. I want to read this off. Rothmus on Twitter put this out, and this is from I think it was a Twitter, it might have been Reddit, and this user Caneville Shine says, I was over at my dad's house today helping with some household chores. He lives in a very rural area of a very red state. At the end of the work, we went out to one of the nearby country bars. It's the kind of place that farmers, truckers, legit cowboy boot wearers, and the working class go to unwind with a cold one. Vice President Harris was on the TV, and the local gun store owner said to his auto mechanic, friends since high school, you know what? She ain't so bad. The economy is recovering, nobody's rioting, and we're standing up on the world stage again. Can't believe I'm saying this, but old Oakland Cam's got my vote this year. I looked around, and all I saw were heads nodding in agreement. I heard a few calls of yes, sir, and damn straight from the men around me.
Oh, my
Even
gosh.
saw the lonely ball cap wearing farmer in the corner raise his drink with a nod. I'm going to go ahead and chalk this up under things that never happened ever. No, seriously. This is unburdened from reality.
Yes.
This is totally unburdened by reality. Like, this is just absolute garbage.
Yes.
There is no way. No,
can
you imagine the gun store owner said to his auto mechanic, you know what? She ain't so. Let me put it.
They added all the buzzwords in there.
Let me put it in what he was thinking in his head of what country folk would do. You know what? She ain't so bad. The economy's recovering. Nobody's rioting, and we're standing up on the world stage again. Can't believe I'm saying this, but old Oakland Cam's got my vote this year. Like, this is like, I'm gonna go to the dumbest AI I possibly can, right? And ask them, like, what would a gun store owner in a very red rural area say about old Oakland Cam?
It sounds like it was out of a really bad political Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just really bad.
Oh my gosh.
It's like ChatGPT wrote this. Honestly, yes. This is the most astroturfed. What this is the beginning of what I like to call the progressive omni message.
Yeah.
And, there's another example of this on the flip side that I have from a Twitter account called Leftism for You, which is a hilarious account.
Yeah.
And they say, they all got the memo with the new talking points to put out. Funny how they were fine with someone even older until now. But either way, it's not just age that was the issue. It's the dementia. It's the incompetency. It's the inability to even read a freaking speech off a teleprompter. And Trump is far more with it and more competent than people many years younger than him. And this account is quote tweeting all, like, just left-wing person after left-wing person that's all saying the exact same thing. Donald Trump is now the oldest nominee for president in American history. Yeah. He's too old to be president. He's not, like, everybody's just reiterating the same thing. And, I caught something similar. This was literally a day after he announced he was dropping out. And I said the Leviathan is now going to turn all of its guns on Trump and the Republicans after spending a month fighting itself. the administrative state, the media, academia, Hollywood, and Wall Street will all immediately pivot now that the internal squabble over strategy has been settled. Starting tomorrow morning, the entire country is going to be bombarded with one message and one message only. You are a racist, sexist bigot if you oppose Kamala Harris. But this isn't 2020. This is 2024. And the Leviathan has far less power and legitimacy than it did 4 years ago. Simply put, fewer people than ever before care what our ideologically hijacked institutions think.
Yeah.
We can still win this
Well,
thing.
okay, you think that, but then JoJo from Jers, who I believe used to be in the administration, don't quote me on that. She says, buckle up, you incel fascist Fs. I know you're not used to hearing these words, but we're coming for you. You bought the mother effing ticket. Now you get to ride the mother effing ride. And
I'm shaking in my boots right
and
now.
I'm looking at this gal, and it's like, first of all, weren't you guys supposed to like turn down the temperature? Second of all, what? Like, am I really supposed? That's right, you all. You're gonna ride the mother effing ride because now we've got Kamala Harris, and she is unburdened from what has been.
You're right.
Like I look at this and it's like, dude, really? I mean, really? Like it's like JoJo. I know you're not. I know you're not curing cancer anytime soon, right? But do you honestly believe that you tweeting this out is causing the rest of us to be like, what do we do now?
Oh, no.
What do we do now? A Twitter personality is threatening me. Like, you're coming after me? Like, do you really want to do that?
Not only that, but you already came after us, tried to shoot our nominee.
Yeah.
And, it didn't work.
Well,
I've got news for you, JoJo. It's not fear.
Yeah.
It's disgust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but every time the left puts on their little Antifa hat and decides we're going to take this fight into the Republican areas. Can I just say, as someone that lives in a conservative area, someone that represents a conservative area, you definitely don't want to be coming for us where we live.
Yeah.
That's not something you want to try out, because honestly,
I got a different message. Please do.
Because honestly, that's not terrifying to them, right? That's more like, I've been waiting my whole life for this.
Nick's over here like, don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, right? But it's just so stupid. It's so absurd. Like, what is she really going to do? You're coming for us? Really, JoJo? Do you actually possess the capacity to leave Twitter long enough to go into an area that doesn't have 5G service? Like, do you really, like, what are you going to do?
Especially now
that the Democratic Party has essentially become the party of like hating masculinity, right? You hate tough guys. Who are you going to use to carry out this act of coming for us? Like, you, Antifa, a drag queen? Like, who are you going to use? Kamala? Who are you going to use?
Joe?
Yeah, Joe.
Joe's a white guy.
Joe going to do it? Like, it's just so but this is what we can expect. They have to manufacture one of two things: excitement for Kamala, which will be nearly impossible. Nearly impossible. The moment they generate any excitement for her, she will get up and speak, and that will douse it, right? So what's left for them? They have to go back to doing what they know best, what they've done best, and that is generating more hatred for Donald Trump and anybody that supports him. We're going to do an episode on this in the future, probably a little bit closer to Election Day, but we're going to have an honest conversation about what we think is going to happen if Trump wins. Because when I see people like JoJo from Jers, right, who's supposed to be a more level-headed person, right? When I see people from JoJo from Jers, what I come to the conclusion of is she's never going to be the one out there throwing Molotov cocktails and bricks. She's always going to sit from the safety of her keyboard, directing and encouraging others to do so. Mm-hmm. And we've already seen it. We've already seen it result in murder. And I don't just mean at the attempted Trump assassination.
Right.
We saw it result in murder in the summer of 2020. Right? This idea that the left, or the party of tolerance and empathy and let's save our democracy, has a problem with violence just simply doesn't bear out with reality. And so, again, I think it's going to be an interesting question, but I think the more that they try to generate excitement about Kamala, the more they're going to realize it's just not going to happen.
I think the most excitement that you're seeing right now about Kamala isn't actually about her. It's about their excitement is that they are now unburdened by a terrible, terrible losing candidate that has no path forward toward winning. And now they have somebody fresh, somebody new, semi-new, that they could probably put a lot of money behind in order to try to re-gaslight the public into liking. So they see the potential of lifting the poll numbers that are dragging right now with a new candidate. And unfortunately for them, Kamala is the one that is going to be probably going to be coronated.
You know what she's going to accelerate? I was showing you guys, I showed Nick this chart right before we started recording of the percentage of young men aged 18 to 29 that identify as Democrats. This is a core demographic of the Democratic Party. If you remember during the Obama eras, absolute majority of 18 to 29-year-old men would have said that, yeah, I'm a Democrat because they love, I remember this. I remember the Obama era when I was in high school and college. I was the minority within my own gender, not, I mean, let alone, you know, among women my same age, they were all on the left. But even among the men that I was, you know, growing up with in high school, in college, that I was around, I was always the outcast in the sense that I was the right-wing guy. I was the conservative guy. This chart shows, and it makes sense, right? You know, younger generations tend to be on the left more so than older generations. So you would think even the men would be on the left. But this chart shows that in 2016, a majority, absolute majority of 18 to 29-year-old men identified as Democrats, 51%. Today, it is 39%.
Wow. That's a big shift.
I'm willing to bet it is not yet hit rock bottom.
No, and it's probably not going to improve with somebody that's going to go around continuing the narrative of toxic masculinity, men are evil. You know, we've been the ones standing in the way of everybody achieving anything for all of human history. Something tells me that narrative is not going to appeal to young men that have woken up to the idea that this political party hates my guts.
Young men are starting to understand that the Democratic Party is operating on a friend-enemy distinction, and they have decreed them, the young men, are an enemy. And all that they're doing now is they're like, noted. Thank you for telling me that I am your enemy. You are now my enemy too.
Well, so what does all of this mean going forward? Well, I'll tell you what. I think we've gone through everything we're going to hit on. We were thinking about going with the testimony from the Secret Service hearing, but that ship's kind of sailed at this point. She's resigning. If you want to go look at some of that, it's obviously available everywhere. There was some really good questions asked by Representative Fallon. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene went after her, but did so in a way that I thought was actually very effective. A lot of the Democrats went after her as well because, again, there's very little excuse for what actually happened. We are probably going to re-engage on some of the points that came on that, but I want to do it at a later date where we can actually get some more information because, again, some of the most important questions that needed to be answered about what happened that day were not answered in that hearing by design. And so that's going to have to be analyzed and addressed, and we'll do that at a later date. But for right now, here's the big takeaway I would like people to understand from our perspective. I think we all agree Kamala Harris is most likely going to be the candidate. I don't see another option at this point for them. And she's entirely beatable, but that doesn't mean Trump is going to win. And Republicans can still screw this up. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people going, but they'll cheat. Fine. Do everything you can to help prevent them from cheating with respect to you getting out there voting and you getting other people out there to voting and you volunteering to work at the polls. That's one of the big things that you can do to actually help prevent cheating, right? Actually go to your registrar's office and sign up. They take volunteers. They rely on volunteers to actually monitor the polling locations. You can be one of the people that, if this is your primary concern, it doesn't have to be a concern you can do nothing about. Go to your local registrar, sign up, say you want to work at the polls as an official poll worker, and then use that as an opportunity to make sure that things go down the way that they should. Does that cover all of the potential ways that cheating could take place? No, but it does cover a big one, and it's something you can do about it. So focus on what we can do something about for right now. I promise you there are other people and legal teams working on some of the other things that you as an individual might not be able to work on. But all that aside, keep in mind, we can still legitimately lose this. And the way we do it at this point is by beating ourselves. It's by focusing on the wrong thing. It's by treating her as if she's not a serious candidate. It's by, consoling ourselves that, Trump has done a great job thus far in this campaign. He's getting a lot of fundraising done. More people have donated. I am telling you, everyone that hates Donald Trump is about to drop millions of dollars on the Harris campaign. Millions. because they look at it as their privileged place within the bureaucracy or in connection to the bureaucracy is at risk. And so they're going to fight with absolutely everything they got. And so if you're concerned about this, if you're concerned about the power of an unelected bureaucracy that seems to be running a whole lot more than it actually should be, if you're concerned about what's going on at the border, well, then focus on those issues which are going to have the greatest impact with the people that can still be convinced one way or the other. And I know that probably frustrates a lot of people. I know it kind of frustrates me sometimes. I feel like I look at this and I feel like this is such a contrast and choice. What exactly are people confused about? But here's all I can tell you. There's so many people out there that are so busy just trying to make ends meet, just trying to put groceries on the table, that they don't got a lot of time to pour into all the political analysis. And that's where you come in. But you have to come in on the issues that they actually care about, not the issues that you think they should care about. And we have to actually explain why a Kamala Harris administration would absolutely be horrible for them on all of the practical things that mean something to them. Their kids' education, their ability to buy groceries, their ability to get a job, their ability to run their small business and keep it open, their ability to keep their community safe. All of those things matter. Kamala Harris has a horrible record on all of them, right? And Trump has a pretty good record on all of it. So that's the sort of stuff that we need to be able to, those are the sorts of arguments that we need to be able to make if we're serious about winning. If we're not serious about winning, then we can just sit back here, meme away, make a lot of jokes about Kamala Harris because quite frankly, it's kind of easy, and do nothing else. And then we can all wake up the day after the election, shocked that we didn't win and looking eager to blame everybody when maybe the person that we should be looking at, taking a harder look at is ourselves and our own effort. Because if we really care about this and we really think this election cycle is as important as it is, and I believe it is, then we have to start assuming personal responsibility. We've said this before. I love the Declaration of Independence. I love the Constitution. I love the philosophies and the ideas that our country was built on. But you know what? Philosophies, ideas, and pieces of paper, no matter how profound the writing upon them is, don't defend themselves. They are completely reliant on people who believe in those things to defend them. And now it's our time to prove it. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.